So Sarah K. Byerly behind the camera. Through the magic of technology and video editing and the power of our own 6 legs, we have walked the trail and we've come out here to the open part of the Payne's Farm battlefield. Dan, tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, we're looking at what the soldiers from the Stonewall Brigade, Leroy Stafford's Louisiana's, John Jones's Virginians, who are going to fight up here, are pretty much going to see at the time of the battle. This field has not changed in 160 years. This is an open field cut again by several ravines. And there's also going to be some Union soldiers who see this, specifically Union soldiers from the brigades of William Morris and J. Warren Kiefer. And if you can see down into the far tree line, that is going to be their position. And it's also through that far tree line is the main Union position along Jacobs Ford Road. Now, as the battle has evolved, as we walk from George Stewart's sector of the line, we made it over here and we're standing roughly around the area where James Walker's, Stonewall Jim's Stonewall Brigade was positioned through the early stages of the fighting. Now the Federals have extended their line up to that far tree line, spread out toward and from Jacobs Ford Road to deal with part of Johnson's envelopment. At one point in time, the 2nd Virginia Infantry is going to come through these woods here, out into this open field. They're going to make it out into the open field, and then they're going to be hit by devastating fire. They're going to be plastered by from musketry coming from Morris's position down in that far tree line. That's going to cause Walker's men to pull back into these woods. But at about the same time, Leroy Stafford's Louisianans are going to be arriving on the field from behind the camera and coming up into position along this farm lane that we're standing along. This is a historic farm lane. This was here at the time of the battle. And so Stafford's men are going to wheel from the Raccoon Ford Road up onto this ridge facing the Union brigades in the far tree line. And then on the other side of Stafford, John Jones's Virginians are going to arrive. And this is going to be the Confederate attack field. They're going to begin pushing Stafford and Jones, that is, across this field toward the brigades of Morris and Kiefer. And this fighting is going to go on for the better part, Chris, I would say maybe a better part of an hour to an hour and a half as the Confederates try to push across this field and drive the Federals back toward Jacobs Ford Road.
And unfortunately, because of that large nature of the pinwheel, Jones' men take longer to get on the battlefield than Stafford's. They took longer to get on the battlefield than the Stonewall Brigade. And so the piecemeal attacks are going to prevent Johnson from getting everybody in at once and being able to make any concerted effort across this field. The other thing that really works against him, and that's why I love the fact that this is so well preserved, the topography is really going to work against the Confederates here. As they begin to deploy on this part of the battlefield, they really think they're going to be sweeping up onto the flank of the Federal position. As the 3rd Corps was coming down the Jacobs Ford Road, they deployed perpendicular to that road. But as Carr's division comes into the left of Prince's, it curves back in sort of a U shape. That's what's going to allow Morris and Kiefer to be in that far tree line instead of having their flank against this field. So the shape of that Union line is going to then play against the Confederates. Also, the shape of this field is going to play against the Confederates. We're actually standing kind of basically at the little crook of a V, and one leg of the V goes that way and one leg of the V goes this way. So when Stonewall Jim Walker's men go riding out into that field, they're basically riding across the front of the Federals who've deployed over there, and that is what leads them to withering fire. Now that attack does cause the Federals to break for a little bit. There's going to be some hand-to-hand fighting in there. It's going to get intense, but when Carr's men deploy, they're going to kind of shore up Prince's defenses. We talked a little bit about Stewart crushing things on that end. That's what's going to lead to the Federals to kind of fall back, and then that redeployment of the Federals is going to then put the Stonewall Brigade in jeopardy out here. So topography plays a key role in how these attacks unfold and who falls prey to who.
Yeah, it certainly does, and I think there's a couple of other factors that play into how this action eventually shakes out. We talked about Johnson's division being veteran soldiers. They'd fought at Culp's Hill, at Gettysburg. Well, any veteran soldier worth their salt is not going to want to advance across this open field toward an enemy holding a strong position. And that results in several disjointed attacks going forward. The 10th Louisiana from Stafford's brigade ventures into this field roughly about 3 times before they're driven back. But another factor that's going to come into play is the fact that John Jones is going to be wounded very early in the fighting. He's going to be out of action. And so command is going to evolve to a fellow named William Witcher. But those two factors, the loss of one of your brigade commanders as well as the terrain, the open field, is going to play into the Federals being able to hold this position as the afternoon goes along. Interestingly enough, Chris, both Stafford and Jones are going to die several months later and several miles from where we're standing here at Payne's Farm in the wilderness on May 5th, 1864.
Ironic that they, Jones is wounded in the head here, survives, and then ends up dying just down the road. And that leadership vacuum is really important. I mean, when Jim Walker gets out into the field, he gets almost to the Federal line, and his men are getting chewed up, and his men get pushed back. So then he grabs some colors and rides out into the field again, trying to use personal leadership to rally his men, realizing nobody's followed him, and he'll go back to the safety of the woods off to my right. But then there's a color bearer from a Virginia regiment that takes his colors out into the field and plants them. And the Federals start shooting at him, and then an officer on the side says, stop, don't shoot him. That man is too brave to die. And so leadership is really an important element on what's going on here. But ultimately, numbers are going to help the Federals. They've got a huge advantage here. The Federals are throwing so much lead into the air on the far side of the field. The Carr's men begin to run out of ammunition. David Bell Birney's men will have to come in as their relief because they've got more ammunition. They're able to replenish the supplies.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect of this fight, is just as Morris and Kiefer are running out of ammunition, the Federals are putting fresh troops onto the field. So all essentially the Federals in the front line need to do is just pull back, and there are fresh brigades waiting to come up and take their position to continue laying down just a horrendous fire across this field.
And we still haven't seen anybody from the 6th Corps. In fact, they say they're hoping to get into the battle, and they just can't. The bottleneck over there is so strong they can't even get onto the field. But this is really key, because regardless of how the actual fight on the field unfurls, 32,000 Federals have been tied up. Throughout the day, Andrew Humphreys has been telling French, get over here, deploy, extend your left, hook up with Warren, and he's not able to. And since French is not able to, then Sedgwick is not able to. So the 4,400 Confederates that fight here have a huge operational impact on this battle by bottling up 2/5 of the Union Army.
Absolutely, and I believe Andrew Humphreys, the Chief of Staff, is going to write after this battle about the great opportunity that was missed because French has Sedgwick sitting right behind him, a fresh Union Corps that is ready to come onto the field, but French, again, not among the A-listers. He's not going to be able to pull up John Sedgwick. And eventually, Mother Nature is going to play a role into this. Darkness is going to fall across the field. It's completely pitch black, really, at about 5 o'clock. You've got men back here in the woods. You've got men out here in this open field. Johnson realizes that for all of his effort in trying to attack the Federal forces, he has really just added to a long list of casualties.
So, and I don't know how far into the alphabet we have to get before we find out where French is. He's not an A-lister, he's not a B-lister. I don't know how far we go. Johnson really performs well. French will get relieved as a result of this when the army's reorganized. And Johnson, who writes his report for this battle pretty late, takes pride in it. And he's like, yeah, basically, I got this dude fired for the way that he performed here. Johnson's going to pull back and link up with the rest of the Confederates as they fall back across Mine Run into that position that Jubal Early scouted out earlier in the day that we talked about in an earlier video. French is going to try to talk about the sanguinary efforts here, blah, 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 blink, 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 blink. But the fact is, he was out of this battle at a time Meade desperately needed him to link up. John Haley, the 17th Maine, he's got a great memoir. He says, the real tragedy of this fight is that we weren't even supposed to be on this road to begin with. If French had taken the left turn at Widow Morris's, he would have linked up with Warren when and where he was supposed to, and this battle would have never taken place. Instead, there are going to be thousands of casualties over here, about 1,200, almost 1,300 Federal casualties, a little over 600 Confederate casualties, and there shouldn't have been casualties because there shouldn't have been a battle. In the meantime, on the far south part of the battlefield, near New Hope Church, the third column of Meade's advance is also going to run into trouble. We're going to explore that part of the battlefield next and figure out how does Meade then react and respond to the slowness that has ground his campaign to an unfortunate halt. With Dan Davis, Sarah K. Byerly, I'm Chris Mackowski. Thanks for being with us here on the Mine Run 160th. We're here at Payne's Farm. Come out, check things out. You can explore this great Civil War trail site for yourself. Bring your family. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot to be, and it's made possible by the work that you have done to support battlefield preservation and education.